Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to another FNAF theory reaction video. And apologies that we have kind of been slacking a little bit, but we are back in the thick of it. Unfortunately, right, this is a horrible intro to start. Redo, let's start over from the beginning. All right. Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to another FNAF theory reaction. Damn it, I forgot what I was gonna say next. All right, can we just roll the tape, roll the video? Because at this point we've done, I think at this point like 60, 70 the last I checked. You know the typical intro, you know the typical vibe here. We are pulling out a FNAF theory video reaction, and we are going to be reacting and giving our own thoughts about it. And it's going to be our own genuine thoughts of stuff we agree with, stuff we disagree with, and if we can learn more about the FNAF story, FNAF lore, because this point, yeah, there's a lot to talk about. It's a lot of confusion out there, and for a game series that has been out for over a decade, we crossed the 10-year mark last year, so this game's been out for now 11 years, and we still don't know what the heck is going on and everything. And talking about MXES, which I guess brief recap before we dive into it. MXES is something that was from the FNAF Security Breach Ruin DLC, the giant glowing blue bunny figure that was a security protocol that was stopping you as Cassie the player, from shutting down all security nodes because you were being tricked by the Mimic. Obviously, this was the first game where the Mimic was a factor and then later got way more screen time and attention in the game Seeker the Mimic, the most recent FNAF game to come out. But let's hear the truth about MXES, because we've been wrong. And I don't know if that's clickbaity, but I'm interested.
MXES is a weird little creature, right? I've already pointed out that this Summoned Skull wannabe doesn't really fit in a lot of narratives that we have, and I've had my thoughts on what it is in the past. That was before FNAF even told us what MXES stood for. And although I was wrong about the acronym, was I right about the purpose of MXES? I think I was closer than some people thought at the time. So slices, put on your aprons and let's bake ourselves a theory. So what does Ruin actually tell us about MXES? Throughout the game, if you wear the Vanny mask for too long, this weird blue rabbit shows up and just kind of mews at you. If he does it for too long, eventually static starts to build on your screen and a random animatronic kills you. And he haunts you throughout the game aside for a few moments of peace, until the end of the game when you're in the basement of the Pizzaplex and you find the main MXES machine, and you're able to access its console to fully disable the security protocol. Once we do, this entity shows up again, but is sucked right back into the machine and stopped for good. It also opens a nearby metal door. And
throughout the entire game, I'm not sure if you're going to dive into this all further, but I've said this time and time again, so apologies if I'm repeating myself, but you just play through the game normally, and you see this giant blue glowing rabbit creature that is trying to stop you from shutting out all the security nodes throughout the game of Ruin, and you think they are the villain. When in actuality, they are the good guy. They are the hero of the story. Because what you are doing as Cassie is you are shutting down all the security nodes in the Pizzaplex because you believe that Gregory is trapped down underneath the Pizzaplex, and the only way to free him, instead of, I don't know, calling the police, calling for help, instead, the course of action is shutting down all the security measures in the Pizzaplex to help him roam free. Well, something was trapped underneath the Pizzaplex, and they were able to roam free, but the problem is it wasn't Gregory, it was the Mimic. So, this entire time, you shutting down the security nodes is a good thing for the MXES, because the security protocol, they are trying to prevent you from shutting down the security nodes to allow the Mimic to roam freely. So they are the hero of the story, not the villain.
pretty much the last of it we see in the entire franchise, but that is plenty to work with for some speculation, which I've done in the past. So what did I think MXES was after the release of Ruin? Well, again, at the time, all we had to work with was it was a weird piece of technology in the basement of the Freddy Fazbear Pizzeria Simulator. So my brain said, okay, Henry probably made it. After all, he made a lot of the things we find in the Pizzaplex, and this room seems to be the one he operated in, so it would make sense that it would be there. And it was then later co-opted by Gregory and Vanessa to lock away the Mimic. In fact, I thought the original MXES console was to conceal experimentation on the Marionette, the acronym being the Marionette Experimentation Enshroudment System. And look, the acronym, I like it, clearly that's wrong. But my thinking at the time, and I still really like these findings, is the fact that there's only 3 findable burn rooms. So if there ever only was 3 burn rooms, then the one character we don't see burn in the epilogue of FNAF 6 never did. That being Lefty, the thing containing the Marionette. My thinking at the time was that Henry found the Mimic down here and thought that maybe he could bring Charlie back using it. Similar to how in the books, Henry ended up making Charlie robots that recreated his lost daughter. If he found this Mimic, maybe he could train it to be more like Charlie.
Yes and no. Because this gets way into book territory, book land. And I know I say this all the time that, at this point, you can't ignore the books. The books are canon just as the games are. Like Scott said way back then when we did the original trilogy in between FNAF 4 and Sister Location. And the fact that there's more books than games of the series now, and very important story beats from the series were first revealed in the books. William Afton, the purple guy, the killer, was announced in the books, in the original trilogy, in the Silver Eyes book, before Sister Location came out. Henry is also a person that has been talked about in the books, and sure, we still have not seen a physical incarnation of Henry in the series yet, but for instance, in FNAF 6, the HRY223 audio log that you hear throughout the FNAF 6 Pizzeria Simulator, you believe that to be Henry, and we believe that Henry was the one who built the bunker, and Henry was the one telling us to lure all the animatronics to burn them all down and effectively kill William Afton and effectively end the story. Obviously, that didn't work. But here's the problem, though. Especially with the stuff we know now in Seek of the Mimic. Is we know William Afton, Henry, and Edwin all exist. And they all collaborated, had a partnership at least at one point. And then, William Afton, maybe also Henry, but certainly at least William Afton, poached all of Edwin's employees to come work for Fazbear. That's what we know about from the tapes and the email logs from the game. That is cut dry concrete. That's explicitly told to us. That's not trying to grasp at straws here, even though the series is all about doing that as well. But here's the problem, though. Before Seek of the Mimic came out, I was personally in the camp and one of those people that was waving the flag that Edwin and Henry are the same person, that their backstories are the exact same. You have Henry, who their child does at a young age, Charlie, Charlotte. They die at a young age by being locked outside the pizzeria and killed by William Afton drives by in a purple car and kills them. Then they go on to possess the puppet here, but also that's not the full story. What also happens is, in the books at least, is Henry is stricken with grief by his child dying, so he creates a robot version of the likeness of his dead child, just as, process the grief and everything of his child dying and everything, that in turn reminds him of his dead child, and he beats the heck out of it, infuse it with agony, and it causes it to see and mimic what it does best, and kill people and be a villain. In Henry's case, it was a stand-in for Baby from Sister Location. That was the backstory for Henry. Is Grandfather, child dies at a young age, Grandfather rebuilds the likeness of his dead child in robot form, reminded of the grief, beats the heck out of it, infused with agony, and robot child later becomes a villain. That is Henry's backstory. But then we get to Edwin, it's the exact same. Edwin, as a child, young child, David, dies at a young age. And then we know from the books, but we also hear about in the audio tapes throughout the game and everything, that Edwin beats, in this case, the M2 for David. And M2 becomes a villain because it starts after being infused with agony, after Edwin beat the heck out of it. It starts mimicking everything that it experienced, everything that Edwin did to it by having the homicidal tendencies. So you have two grandfathers, have a child die at a young age. Said grandfathers build a robot in the likeness of their dead child, beats the heck out of it, and then infuse it with agony, and they become a villain. In Edwin's case, it was the Mimic, M2 now. And in Henry, Charlie, it was Baby. So that all being said, coming full circle with all this, what does this all mean? It's one from the books, yes, but it's also one of those things where it's like, well, that's very coincidental, isn't it? That you have two of these fathers, very important fathers, albeit, have the exact same backstory. That can't be a coincidence.
And whether or not that worked, that was the purpose of all this technology. But again, that was wrong. And I also later changed my mind when Help Wanted 2 came out. In Help Wanted 2, it made it seem like Glitchtrap had these different iterations. So I started considering the possibility that GGY and Vanny were iterations of Glitchtrap, and they survived being removed from Vanessa and Gregory, and that Help Wanted 2 was those two personalities battling it out to try to take over the mind of the next host. So in that context, MXES instead was an old piece of technology that was then utilized by GGY to keep everyone safe and shrouded, so Vanny could focus on recreating Burntrap while no one could be the wiser. But then when GGY was separated and eventually destroyed, Vanny didn't know how to disable MXES, and it was instead becoming a hindrance, so they needed to trick Cassie down there to turn it off for them. Which again, that's a good concept. I like that idea. But then we got Secret of the Mimic, which kind of took all the lore we thought we knew, and Book of Spells has been helpful, but I'm getting really tired. I've been at this for me. This thing for every person name is supposed to mean. It stands for Mechanical X-Form Experimental Storage. It's only found on one monitor in the entire game near the end in the safe room next to Murray's office in his private home. It's also listed as Mechanical X-Form Experimental Storage number 1, which implies there's more. But within this MXES console, we can execute Cradle.exe, and seemingly in-game, that doesn't do anything. But it does piss off the Mimic, which then leads us to run away, unsuccessfully. But that's not the only information related to MXES we get in this game, because there's Fiona, or F10 and 4, and I'm no scientist, but this box and this box are the same damn box.
Agreed. I mean, come on. At that point, that's just cruel. But then it begs the question is, how does this F10N4 Fiona MXES bots get all the way down? It's not only underneath the pizza plats, it's under the FNAF sits location, because reminder from Ruin, you start with the pizza plats, then you go underneath that to FNAF sits, and you go underneath that to where you see the MXES machine where you recover Gregory at the end of the game. So you go beneath FNAF sits. So how does that get there?
except the label has been changed. So what's the deal with that? Because clearly this is the same kind of machine, but unless somebody went to the Fiona machine, shaved off that label, and re-welded a new label, these are two different boxes. Well, with the other evidence in Secret of the Mimic, that does track. After all, in a similar safe room in the main Murray's Costume manor, we instead see experimental storage number 2, which is where we access the Mimic schematics. So if this experimental storage is also a MXES console, this starts to make a lot more sense. After all, the Fiona machine is in the basement of MCM, and likewise its console is in the same building. So this MXES console in Murray's private home is likely connected to a separate MXES machine in Murray's home that we don't get to see. My main thinking is that these are both mechanical X-Form experimental storage containers, but since this one was created to hold M1's personality, either Murray just personalized it to make it more like Fiona, or since this computer is located within Murray's Costume manor, just to be extra safe, he didn't want to list what the full name of this project was on any monitor, even if it's in his private safe room. I mean, we know that.
I will say this whole idea of two different MXES machines now with Fiona and MXES, does that make it any easier from a timeline storytelling perspective? Absolutely not. But first of all, think about what series we're talking about here, where nothing is simple. Hell, that's why we started this whole series of doing these theory reaction videos, is so I can keep up the lore, I can keep y'all guys up with the lore, I can share my interpretations of what I've always thought the story lore always was. People can share their own thoughts. And we can just have this big old grand journey together for honestly as long as FNAF goes on, which may not be until the sun blows up. But this was my issue though. When I first saw the Fiona machine in Secret of the Mimic, my issue is the perspectives and intent because they're AI. The AI programming on both machines is completely different. Because Fiona, is pushing, encouraging Edwin to, and when I say Fiona, I mean the MXES bots F10 and 4, not Fiona, the actual person. Not to be confusing. But Fiona, the machine, F10 and 4. They're pushing Edwin to make David their robot child because they were built to be a motherly figure after Fiona, the actual person, died at Fall Fest. And, this robot mimic mother wanted a child to care for because mother programming, they didn't have a child to care for, so they looked to David. And in order to get to David, instead of it being a human version, they wanted their own family. They wanted the family back together. So instead of getting human David, they wanted robot mimic David, M2. M1, M2 together. So Fiona was pushing Edwin to make M2 a robot version of David. Wanted to put the family back together. Right? But then you have MXES from Security Breach Ruin, where it's different. Where Fiona wants the mimics to come together and have a family, right? MXES, meanwhile, is a security protocol that is keeping the mimic locked away underneath the pizza plets. And anyone who tries to shut down the security nodes to try to free the mimic, MXES comes out and tries to stop you. So, having a mimic family and trying to bring people together versus keeping it locked away, I want to be a robot scientist to know that the intentions are different. Sorry about that. All right, we move.
The man was paranoid. His private computer in his private office in his private house has redacted and locks files on it. Edwin, ain't nobody getting to your secret folders. Let us look at them. But Secret of the Mimic is showing us that there's likely at least 2 of these really big boxes. One of them has the Mimic schematics, and the other one has Cradle.exe. And since the one with the Mimic schematics is the Fiona console, our MXES from Ruin must be the one with Cradle.exe. The one that we don't actually get to see in Secret of the Mimic, the one with the correct label we would have seen in Ruin. So if our Ruin MXES has Cradle.exe inside of it and is capable of being run, does that help us at all? Does that tell us more about what MXES and the entity might be? Well, I think so, if we start talking about what the game tells us Cradle.exe is created to do. There's only one point in the entire game that we get a clear answer as to what Cradle.exe could possibly be, and it's in an email found in Edwin's office in the main building. That email being from Fiona, or F10 and 4. It reads, "Edwin, please talk to me. We need to stop it together. Here are the blueprints for the Cradle. It can keep David safe and provide boundaries. It's a type of computer, and it's bigger than anything you've done before. If you won't finish the program, consider building the Cradle. It will keep people safe." So whatever Cradle.exe is, it needs MXES.
Also, I doubt when they say David, they're referring to human David, they're referring to Robot David M2. Just point out there.
In order to function, and it's something that could theoretically contain and capture M2, or quote, keep David safe and provide boundaries. A program that would keep the Mimic in one place. Hey, that kind of sounds like MXES. Look, I really wanted to do the bit again, but if I did the bit every video, it would get old. But half of theorizing is setting up something and then giving you that twist, so theoretically, I could script every video to have that bit. I think it's a good bit, but again, I don't want to overuse it just because we're talking about. So to put this together, what does MXES actually do in Ruin? Whenever we're wearing the mask, it tries to kill us. It gets closer, observing us, until eventually it sends an animatronic after us. The Mimic and Glitchtrap seem to desperately want to get rid of this thing, but they seem incapable of doing so on their own. The Mimic as Gregory on the walkie-talkie and Glitchtrap as Helpy in the mask itself need a human to manipulate downstairs and undo all of MXES' security protocols, until ultimately making it down to the main CRT monitor next to the machine and fully deactivating the program. But when we, as Cassie, are not using the Vanny mask, MXES is absolutely no threat to us. MXES isn't even visible. MXES exists solely in the AR world. So if MXES is Cradle.exe,
because remember, game-wise, the only way to shut down the security nodes is you wearing the Vanny mask. You being connected to the network. That's the only way that MXES was able to show up.
this makes sense, doesn't it? The point of Cradle.exe is to capture and neutralize the Mimic, and that's exactly what MXES has done and is trying to do again with Glitchtrap. The Mimic is currently locked away in the pizzeria basement in a sealed room. Cradle.exe has captured M2 and given it boundaries, exactly like M1 said it was going to, putting M2 in a locked, sealed room and preventing its programming from leaving. Now, when Glitchtrap, an iteration of the Mimic, is actively being used throughout the Pizzaplex, MXES, or the Cradle.exe program, is hot on our tail, seeking out that source of the Mimic and attempting to obtain it, neutralizing the person carrying it if it must. So both the Mimic and Glitchtrap recognize that a program like MXES or Cradle.exe is enough to stop them both in their tracks forevermore. M2 might have been locked away ever since we ran the original Cradle. Sure, he's walking away at the end of the game, but we don't know where to. And if he ever gets back to MCM, it's likely that Cradle.exe is going to lock him in the same room we find him in 50 years down the line. And Glitchtrap sure as hell does not want to be locked inside of this MXES box, just like M1 was. So Glitchtrap and the Mimic have a shared goal to get rid of Cradle.exe, but neither of them can do anything about it. M2 is still locked in the basement, and if Glitchtrap is around too long, he's going right down there with it. So they need a human, a non-Mimic controlled human, a regular human to manipulate and trick into deactivating all the security protocols that MXES has set up so that once it's finally deactivated, they can both be free. Note that in the Brazil ending, Glitchtrap seems to take over Cassie's mind pretty instantaneously. Why didn't it do it until then? I think it's because MXES was still out and about, and if Glitchtrap was permanently out and about inside of Cassie's mind, it would have been yoinked by Cradle.exe the moment it could. But the big question is, who set this all up? I still think the likely culprit is Cassie's dad. We know he was investigating the Pizzaplex through Help Wanted 2 and Cassie's dialogue. If he encountered the MXES console and
I also think another reason why Glitchtrap, if this interpretation is true, another reason why Glitchtrap, Helpy, I'm also thinking about it as well, but Glitchtrap, Helpy, they're the same person. They're able to take Cassie so easily is in the very beginning when Helpy first appeared and when you first got the Vanny mask, the occipital nerve shot into Cassie's eye, the chip, to allow Cassie to not only communicate with Helpy, but I guess in this case it would be Glitchtrap. That also allowed Cassie to put on the Vanny mask and go into the VR AR network. That also allowed Helpy to use Cassie's voice likeness to like lure animatronics the way you use it later in the game. Sorry about that. I don't know why allergies are really bothering, but I can't remember what I was saying. But I think I said everything I said in that point. That the occipital nerve was important because that's when Helpy first appeared, but Helpy / Glitchtrap. Helpy was able to use Cassie's voice after that. That's how Cassie was able to put on the Vanny mask and enter the VR AR network, is through the occipital nerve.
Cradle.exe, he could be the one responsible for its rabbit makeover. We know Bonnie was his favorite, and if he was placing security nodes throughout the entire Pizzaplex, this would explain why MXES got so strong and able to contain everything so well. After all, Glitchtrap is a menace during Help Wanted 2 and Security Breach, but in Ruin is terrified. Cassie's dad might have been that difference. So, was I right or was I wrong?
Security Breach, Glitchtrap being there. Interesting. That's certainly a take. Okay.
Wrong. Mostly wrong. But there were parts of that theory that were right. And that's why I love theorizing alongside an ongoing series like Five Nights at Freddy's. You can come up with a pretty good speculation, and even if some or most of it is proven wrong, some of those bones do carry over into what is more accurate. So was MXES built by Henry and adjusted by Cassie's dad and GGY and it was this whole thing? No. But it is a machine that was keeping the Mimic locked away, and it was likely adjusted by Cassie's dad. But now we know the true origins of it, all the way back to M1, who was just trying to keep M2 safe so that Edwin could fix it. And now it's loose and needs to be dealt with. So let me know if you think this is finally the correct theory on MXES in the comments below.
I would say my question is, if that's the case, and the Mimic we see in Ruin is also the same M2 we see at the end of Secret of the Mimic, then I would say my question is, explain the timeline. We need a full-on Mimic timeline of how does it go from M2, being free and having the full-on schematics, so the full-on executive access from the MCM, right, and then walking away freely, to being locked away underneath the Pizzaplex, with the MXES machine locking away and keep it at bay with the Cradle.exe. Like, I guess if you squint at it, there's an interpretation that makes sense, but I mean, it's just not a satisfying answer because we're talking about like a 50, 60 year jump. And I kind of want to know like what happened at like 50, 60 years. Like, how did it get there? Right? Like, I know there's rumor out there that in lead up to the Pizza Plex, Phasma Entertainment, you know, came in and woves of vans and brought animatronics and rundown machinery to the Pizza Plex, and people believed one of the things being there was an old robot being the Mimic. To me, that's a loose connection at best, and to me, I wonder if revisiting that theory is important because that was a theory that was at this point a couple of years ago, and I wonder if that information holds up to this day because in the series, you have a theory, you have an interpretation, you have a story in mind, and then within a year, boom, it's all shut away, it's all completely contradicted because a book comes out, or best case scenario, a game comes out, because let's face it, games are fun, and it calls into question everything, right? There's a reason why ever since FNAF 4, FNAF 3, every single FNAF theory video was like, oh, this is the end of FNAF. This is the end of the story. All the answers are solved from FNAF 3. And obviously, if we're still doing FNAF videos to this day, it's not solved. Very similarly, how every year there's a 2023 FNAF timeline, catch you up on the games, the books. Hey, this is a story 2023. Then 2024, here's the story in 2024. Then 2025, here's the story. 2026, 2027, 2028. I assume it's going to be the same deal. So, it's just an interesting idea. But yeah, I feel like I just want to know a little bit more information, like what happened the 50, 60 years, just to really hammer the point home of, yes, this is where M2 started, leaving the Pizza Plex, getting the full-on schematics, and this is how they end up underneath the Pizza Plex by the time Security Breach Ruin rolls around. Yes, totally agree. But I think that's an answer that's going to be solved at a later time.